More of a team player, I repeated, keeping my voice steady while my fists clenched beneath the desk. Across from me, Raymond Torres leaned back in his ergonomic chair, that smug grin fixed on his face like it had never known doubt. Look, Natalie, you're a powerhouse. No one's questioning that, he said. But Brianna, she lights up the room. Makes people feel comfortable. Just easier to work with. Less intense. There it was. Not a comment on my results. Not a critique of my skills. Just that I didn't charm enough people in the break room. That I was too focused on performance. I'd spent 6 years at Phoenix Analytics, joined at 29, fresh from grad school, hungry to prove myself. Now, at 35, I was the New York office's backbone, landing multi-million-dollar contracts, optimizing internal systems, and slashing costs by over 30%. But here I was, passed over for promotion. Brianna, the one who arrived late, left early, and laughed a little too hard at executive jokes, was their new golden girl. Raymond pretended to shuffle papers, clearly expecting me to nod, smile, and swallow the insult. Instead, I reached into my satchel and placed a white envelope on his desk. I understand, I said coolly. Thank you for your honesty. He raised an eyebrow. What's this? My resignation. Effective in 2 weeks. His grin faltered. Natalie, hold on. Let's not be hasty. It's not hasty, I interrupted. You were right. I am focused on results. That's why I'm leaving. What no one in that office had ever noticed or bothered to ask was that while I was boosting Phoenix's numbers, I was also building something of my own. A consulting agency. Fully funded. Fully operational. Already profitable. I wasn't walking away defeated. I was stepping into ownership. As I walked out of Raymond's office, I felt eyes track me across the floor. Word travels fast on the 18th floor. I could practically hear Brianna picking out throw pillows from my desk. But I returned to my workspace with quiet precision. Because I knew something they didn't. Inside that resignation envelope was a second document, a detailed breakdown of the proprietary system I'd been quietly developing for 3 years. What had started as a frustration-fueled side project had evolved into a data-driven powerhouse. I patented it 6 months ago. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Brianna strut through the office, drunk on her new title, fake laughing louder than ever. One morning, she perched dramatically on the edge of my desk. I hope you're not upset, she cooed. I know how hard you worked for that promotion. I smiled. No hard feelings. I'm sure you'll be amazing. She walked away, thinking she'd won. What she didn't know was that the glowing performance metrics with my name on them, they weren't just luck or hustle, they were powered by my system. 1 week later, my inbox lit up. Subject: Opportunity at Solstice Tech. From Robert Kim, CEO. He'd heard I was leaving. Our coffee turned into a strategy session. He didn't want to hire me, he wanted a partner. Creative control. Equity. Full backing. This isn't just a job, Natalie, he said, sliding a contract across the table. This is where you lead. On my last day, just as I handed him my badge, Raymond called me in. He looked pale, a stack of stapled pages trembling in his hand. We need to talk about this system, he said. Why didn't you ever tell us? I tried. I replied calmly, smoothing the sleeve of my blazer. 3 times. You canceled every meeting. Said we needed to focus on friendlier team dynamics. He flipped through the report, his face draining with each page. This is game-changing. The cost savings, the automation models, the client satisfaction metrics. And it's patented, I said. Approved last week. Solstice Tech will be implementing it across their global operations. Solstice, he sputtered. But they're our top competitor. Natalie, you can't. What about loyalty? I laughed softly. You mean the loyalty you showed when you handed my promotion to someone who couldn't submit a report on time? He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. If you'd looked past your bias, if you'd seen the results instead of listening for who laughed at your jokes, this would have ended differently. We'll match their offer, he blurted. Senior director. Just stay. I shook my head. It's not about the title. It's about respect. I left him scrambling to contain a crisis he created. As I boxed up my things, I found a sticky note on my monitor. Sorry to see you go. Keep in touch, Brianna. I smiled, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. She'd hear my name again. So would the rest of the industry. My first day at Solstice Tech felt like stepping into a different world. No fluorescent lights. No cramped cubicle. Just a corner office overlooking the Hudson and a nameplate that read, Natalie Reyes, Director of Operational Strategy and Innovation. But more than the view, the difference was how I was treated. At the staff meeting, Robert told my story. Not just what I'd done, but how I'd done it. She's bringing a proven, game-changing methodology, he said. She has my full trust. She'll have yours, too. At Phoenix, I'd been the ghost behind everyone else's success. At Solstice, I was the architect of something greater. 3 months later, my phone buzzed during a strategy workshop. David Tran. Check the business wires. Huge news. I stepped into my office, opened my laptop, and saw the headline. Phoenix Analytics faces 30% client loss after Q2 collapse. I leaned back in my chair, the view of the river stretching wide beyond the glass. Sometimes walking away isn't defeat. It's the beginning of something far bigger. The article was damning. Missed deadlines, spiraling budgets, and the loss of 3 flagship clients. Phoenix Analytics' internal infrastructure was described as fractured, its operational metrics in freefall. But one quote stood out above all. The level of service has nosedived, said Thomas Kwan, CEO of Terra Nova. We used to trust Phoenix with high-volume rollouts. Now they can't even meet basic timelines. It's like they lost the backbone of their operations. They had, because I was that backbone. For 5 years, I had quietly engineered the systems that kept Phoenix Analytics running like a well-oiled machine. Brianna didn't even know what she was sitting on, let alone how to sustain it. Another text buzzed in. David Tran again. Brianna's having a meltdown in the break room. I leaned back in my chair, warm sunlight flooding my corner office. I didn't need revenge. I had something better, results. If you've ever been underestimated or overshadowed by someone who hadn't earned their seat, this story is for you. Because my rise, it's just beginning. While Brianna parroted buzzwords and coasted on charm, the scaffolding beneath her was collapsing. Raymond, who bet on personality over performance, was now watching his choice unravel publicly. Meanwhile, at Solstice Tech, the system I created was doing exactly what it was designed to transform. Turnaround times slashed by over 50%. Client satisfaction at an all-time high. Efficiency metrics through the roof. Robert, our CEO, had just greenlit full-scale implementation. 3 Fortune 500 companies were now in talks to license the platform. Then, one crisp Thursday morning, 6 months after I walked away from Phoenix, Robert appeared at my desk, newspaper in hand. Have you seen this? He asked. The headline read, Phoenix Analytics faces full restructure amid talent exodus and system failures. I scanned the page. The board had finally realized the mess. They tried rebuilding my system without me. But it wasn't just code or dashboards. It was architecture. It was vision. They didn't understand how it worked, Robert said. I nodded, because they thought it was just a tool, not the thinking behind it. He smiled, eyes sharp, which is why the board has unanimously approved your promotion. Starting next week, you're our new Executive Vice President of Strategic Innovation. You're not just driving results. You're shaping our future. A wave of pride rose in my chest. This was what recognition looked like. Not for politics. Not for noise. For impact. Later that afternoon, an email arrived. Subject, apology. From Raymond Torres. Natalie, I hope this finds you well. I'm sure you've heard what's happened at Phoenix. I wanted to say I was wrong. Not seeing your value was the biggest mistake of my career. Your system was the backbone. We didn't realize that until everything fell apart. I resigned last week. Before I left, I made sure the board knew exactly where we failed by ignoring you. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know you were right. Results do matter. Raymond, there was a time when that message would have stirred something in me. But that time had passed. Across the room sat a framed patent. Beside it, a plaque from our record-breaking quarter. And just above it, a Forbes article naming me one of the top 10 women redefining innovation in tech. Raymond's words, a footnote. My story had already moved on. I replied simply, Raymond, thank you for your email. You're right, results do matter. I wish you well in whatever comes next. Natalie. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. As the room filled with engineers, designers, and project leads, people who respected the work, not just the politics, I stood at the front. Before we begin today's launch planning, I want to tell you a story, I said. Not about software or systems, but about value. About recognizing it in yourself, and never letting someone else define your worth. Because walking away wasn't the end. It was the upgrade. And this was just the beginning. As I spoke, I watched the room shift, heads nodding, eyes lighting up, people leaning in. Not just for the strategy, but for the story, for the truth behind the numbers. They understood it now. This company, our company, wasn't built on illusion. It was built on substance, on the courage to speak up, to lead when no one's listening, and to keep going when no one's watching. That evening, on my drive home, I passed the old Phoenix Analytics building. I slowed instinctively. Their massive logo, once a symbol of everything I chased, looked worn now, faded, tired. A for lease sign hung in a third-story window. They were downsizing. Again. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt grateful. Grateful they couldn't see my value. Grateful they made space by pushing me out. Grateful because in doing so, they unknowingly gave me the freedom to build something better. Because sometimes the greatest opportunities come dressed as rejection. Sometimes, being too focused on results is exactly what sets you apart. And sometimes, the best response to being undervalued is to build something so impactful they can't ignore you anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from David lit up the screen. Phoenix's board is asking about you, wondering if you consider coming back as CEO. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back slowly. Thanks, David, but I'm exactly where I need to be. And I meant every word, because real success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about honoring your own potential, even when no one else recognizes it. It's about refusing to shrink to fit someone else's narrow vision. As I pulled into the driveway of my Brooklyn brownstone, I thought of all the other Natalies out there. Quiet professionals doing extraordinary work. Passed over because they weren't flashy enough. Overlooked because they didn't play the game. Maybe the story, the one I lived, will reach one of them. Maybe it's the push they need to stop waiting for permission and start carving their own path. Because rejection, it's not always a wall. Sometimes, it's a launch pad. You take the doubt, the dismissal, the patronizing smiles, and you use them as rocket fuel. To build something unshakable. Something that transforms your not enough into you're irreplaceable. Later that night, I sat in my home office reviewing global licensing proposals for the now patented system I built. The same system Phoenix once dismissed as too complicated, too niche, too dependent on me. Above my desk, I'd framed the words Raymond once used as a criticism. You're too focused on results. He meant it as a flaw. Funny thing is, he was right. That focus, it brought me here. To leadership, to innovation, to peace, to purpose, to exactly where I was always meant to be. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for walking this road with me. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked? Told you were too serious, too intense, too much? Because I've been there. And I want you to know something. You are not too much. You are not imagining it. And your value doesn't decrease just because someone else failed to see it. If this story resonates with you, I hope you'll subscribe, not just to follow my journey, but to be part of a space that celebrates resilience, grit, and the quiet power of those who refuse to settle. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Because if my journey can be a mirror for yours, maybe together we can remind each other. Rejection isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your chapter. The one where you write the rules. Where you define what success looks like. So keep building. Keep believing. And never let anyone make you feel like results are a bad thing. They're just scared of your potential.